Assalamu alaikum, this is Dr. Mona Al-Idrisi, author of the Muslim Narcissist book. In today's podcast, I'll be speaking about the codependent's toxic relationship with their Qareen. Now, in order for you to understand this podcast, it is important that you listen to my previous podcast about the narcissist relationship with their Qareen, because there's a lot of information in there about the Qareen that I'm not going to repeat in this podcast to try and keep this podcast as short as possible. So just to quickly recap, the Qareen is the evil jinn devil that is assigned to you until you die. So we have 4 angels and 1 evil Qareen. And basically this Qareen is stuck to us for life as well. Whether he or she likes it or not, it's just one of those things that they have to deal with as well as us having to deal with a Qareen being with us all the time. So we're kind of stuck with each other. And a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between our Qareen and other jinns? Well, the main difference is that this Qareen is assigned to us personally. So any type of ruqya that you do will not get rid of your Qareen, but it will get rid of other jinns that are not meant to be in your life. But because the Qareen is meant to be in your life, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to overpower the Qareen so that we can become better people and elevate our nafs, no matter how much you do ruqya on your Qareen, it's not going to disappear. It's not going to go anywhere. And a lot of people don't understand this when they go for ruqya. So they might feel like they're possessed by some jinn, but they don't realize that it's possession by the Qareen and you can't get rid of that Qareen. So they go for ruqya again and again for years and years, spend so much money, and at the end of it all, only to realize that actually this Qareen is stuck with me for life. And the whole point of the ruqya on the Qareen is to regain control and power. So the ruqya and the adhkar that you read for yourself when it comes to the Qareen will just help you to overpower it and control it and so on. So to start off with, I would like you to visualize the 3 levels of nafs that I've mentioned before. So the lowest level will be an-nafs al-ammara bis-su', the nafs that is inclined to evil, that categorizes sociopaths, narcissists, psychopaths, and so on. And then you've got an-nafs al-lawwama. An-nafs al-lawwama is the self-blaming nafs, so that's in the middle, and usually the codependents, they fall in there. And then you've got an-nafs al-mutma'inna, which is the highest form of nafs, the most elevated form, and they are the empaths. So the difference between the 3 when it comes to our Qareen is that the people who have a nafs al-ammara bis-su', they are overpowered by the Qareen. Okay, they're controlled and enslaved by their Qareen. So their nafs is driven by what the Qareen tells them to do pretty much all the time. Now, those who have a nafs al-lawwama, it's 50-50 with them. So sometimes, because they have empathy, right, they have a lot more empathy than narcissists do, there are times when the Qareen can overpower them, and there are times when the Qareen cannot. So sometimes a codependent will be faced with a situation and they would decide to do the right thing. They will make the choice to do the right thing for the right reasons, and they might repent as well. You know, they might go for Hajj, go for Umrah. They'll do things that a narcissist really struggles with doing for the right reasons. So that's why I say that those who have a nafs al-lawwama, their Qareen has partial control over them. Now, those who are in the category of a nafs al-mutma'inna, the highest elevated nafs, they have full control over their Qareen. So the Qareen, there's nothing really they can do with the empath, and this can actually be in the favour of the Qareen as well, because remember, the Qareen has free will. It's a jinn. So on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring that Qareen into account as well. That jinn will be brought to account for everything that it did to make the human being deviate, right? So if a Qareen finds that for most of his or her life they've been controlled by the empath, they've been tamed by the empath, it will actually be in their favour. The empath might even save their Qareen on the Day of Judgment. They might save their Qareen from punishment and possibly hell, because they managed to control their Qareen. So not only did they save themselves, they also saved their Qareen, because the Qareen is not held accountable now for all the horrible things it made the human being do. So that's the power of the empath. And the Qareen will not truly realize this until the Day of Judgment, when they see that the empath actually saved them by placing those strong boundaries in place. And I find that amazing, because sometimes when you have to exercise tough love on people, they don't realize it's for their own benefit until much later on in life. And the Qareen is a soldier of the shaitan, right? He reports to the shaitan, and his mission is to completely corrupt the human being. How does someone become a narcissist? A narcissist essentially is somebody who is completely overpowered by their Qareen. So if you don't allow your Qareen to do that to you and make you into someone narcissistic, then he or she is put in their place as well, and you've saved them from a lifetime of corruption. So essentially, you could be saving your own Qareen as well, and you'll get the reward for that as well. You will get the reward for placing those correct boundaries. So when it comes to codependence, it's slightly different. So the Qareen's work starts to really kick in from the time of puberty. And why do I say that? It's because the Prophet Muhammad said that, people will not be accountable for their deeds until they reach the age of puberty. So children who die, before the age of puberty, they go straight to Jannah. They do not become accountable for any mistakes that they made when they were young. But as soon as you hit the age of puberty, you are now accountable for your sins. This is when the Qareen starts working on the human being, right? This is when you start to see narcissistic tendencies in teenagers and codependency, tendencies. Now, codependency often starts from a young age, because the codependent is the people pleaser. And the codependent is often the child who's always seeking the approval of the narcissistic parent who is not giving it to them. Okay, they're working really hard to please the narcissistic parent because they're seeing their other narcissistic siblings get the validation and supply that they need to become happier children. They've got their self-confidence, they've got praise, they've got everything coming to them. And the codependent, because the narcissistic parent sees the codependent child as weak and not as powerful and not as strong as the narcissistic children, they will always put the codependent child in a situation where they will always run around looking for their approval. And this benefits the narcissistic parent because it means they've got a servant, right? They've got a little slave who runs around, seeking the approval of the narcissistic parent. And because of this, because they get their self-worth and validation and approval from the narcissistic parent, they will always seek validation and approval from other narcissistic individuals as they grow older, because they're being programmed into this pattern of being. They're being programmed into, these are the types of people we need to seek approval from. It becomes a psychological complex when you don't want to seek approval from other codependents or other empaths. And that's why lots of codependents are drawn to narcissistic individuals, because the codependent, being the people pleaser, wants to serve and fix and make the narcissistic persona happy, because the codependent is exactly the same as them. They don't get their needs fulfilled by each other. The needs that they have are only fulfilled by the narcissist, because again, they were programmed to receive their needs from narcissistic individuals and not from other people. Usually they wouldn't have had an empathic role model growing up, so they either had a codependent mother, for example, and a narcissistic father, or it was the other way around, so a narcissistic mother and a codependent father. So some children turn out to be codependent like their parent, and that parent will also be running around for their narcissistic wife or husband, and the codependent sees this. They see that this is what normal relationships look like. We serve the narcissist. So they will grow up looking for narcissists to match with and be married to and have children with, because that's all they know. They know that this is what a marriage looks like based on their own experiences growing up. So codependent, toxic relationships are the complete norm for them. So here, when you look at the traumas that someone codependent has been through, I'm not going to go into detail about this because it's all in my book. If you check out my book, The Muslim Narcissist, you will see in detail how someone can become a codependent, man or woman, from childhood. But this podcast is mainly about, the relationship with the Qareen. So if we look at the childhood traumas that a codependent has been through, so seeing abuse, not having their needs met, not being able to stand up for themselves, not being able to say what they want, not being able to, express the things that they want and how they feel because they're always judged for it or ridiculed for it, or they're dismissed altogether, they're abandoned, they're neglected. They're just seen as, like I said, servants. They are the caretakers, they are the fixers. Sometimes a narcissistic parent will drag the codependent child into marital problems so that they can, help their parents fix their problems. Like, oh, can you see how toxic your mother's being? Can you see it? Can you see it? And then the codependent gets stuck in between their parents' marital problems, and now they become the caretaker, now they become a fixer. Now they have all these burdens on their shoulders as a child that they should not be carrying. A lot of codependent mothers as well will lean on their empathic and codependent children and, basically dump all of their emotional baggage onto them. They will complain about their fathers all the time to them. They will complain about their life. They might even tell them that we're suicidal because of how much they hate their life because of the abuse the narc husband is inflicting on the mother. So there's a lot of trauma going on in the codependent's life, a lot of trauma, and they carry that with them into adulthood because they do take a lot of that baggage on personally. A lot of codependent children grow up believing that a lot of this was my fault. My parents fighting, a lot of it's my fault because they used to fight over me, over my childcare, over my homework, over my bedtimes, over me not eating, over me being sick. So when a child constantly hears their parents fight over things that are to do with them, they will blame them for a divorce, blame them for any domestic violence going on at home. And they now feel like they need to owe it to their parents and their siblings to fix the situation. So they're usually the good child, the child who just wants to make everyone happy without taking their needs, wants, opinions and desires into any account. So this is perfect for a narcissist. Can you imagine this person grows up attracting narcissists, and narcissists only care about themselves, right? They're very self-centered. They want people to worship them, serve them, do everything for them. And that's why the codependent who cannot stand up for himself or herself is the perfect match for a narcissist. Codependents and empaths don't usually work together because the empath gets fed up of the codependent as well, because the empath wants a partner. They want an equal partner rather than someone that they have to take care of too all the time, like a child, because it's very difficult communicating with someone who's codependent. They don't know how to communicate their needs and their wants, and so it's difficult for an empath to actually be in a relationship with a codependent as well. The maturity level is different, the communication is difficult, and empaths just crave being with their own kind. So codependents will always find that the only option they have really is to be with narcissists, because, like I said, they can't have their needs fulfilled by each other either. Two codependents in a relationship, they often don't have a successful relationship. It's often toxic as well because they get frustrated with each other. They don't get the validation that they need because they've both got the same issues and the same problems. So when a codependent is developing their personality, it starts to show more in teenage years. So the codependent, because they're in the middle between narcissism and empathy, you'll find that they fluctuate between the two very often. So you'll find them go through periods of making mistakes and sinning and getting involved in, possibly haram relationships, going to the club, smoking, drinking. But then they have periods of time where they feel really bad about it. And they repent and they pray and they read Quran and they fast Ramadan and they go for Umrah, they go for Hajj. They do all of those things. But they're in and out of this. Their Iman fluctuates a lot. Okay? So here the Qareen is thinking, all right, how can I deal with this person? So this person has empathy. So I'm unable to have full control. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to completely play on the mental health of this individual. I am going to fulfill my satanic mission by only making sure that the codependent ends up with a narcissist. And it's not a coincidence that the codependent is always drawn to narcissists. It's not just childhood trauma. So when you're a child, it does become more about childhood trauma because you gravitate towards what you're familiar with. Now, when you reach the age of puberty and you know right from wrong and you're more emotionally mature, you now can make the decision as to whether you want to stay that person or not. Okay, so you have the decision to make, and that's why we're accountable from the age of puberty in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah, He creates our intellect to be fully functional by the age of puberty. Our aql is functional at the age of puberty. We are able to make our own rational decisions. So if we decide that we are going to continue this toxic cycle of being with problematic people, then we now allow the Qareen to overpower us. Because there are some people out there are some teenagers out there who say to themselves, you know what? I will never be like my dad. I will never be a narcissist like my dad. I never want to be controlled and abused like my mum was. Never is that going to happen to me. And they make a conscious decision to work on themselves from a very young age because they are already aware. They're aware and they see how problematic a codependent character is and how problematic a narcissistic character is. And they don't want to be either of them. They don't want to be the victim and they don't want to be the abuser. And that's why you get a lot of teenagers who are very empathic and they just don't want to be anything like their toxic parents. They've made that rational decision for themselves. Whereas some others who are so caught up in the hate and resentment towards their abusive parents and the parents who neglected them and the parents who didn't give them enough love, the Qareen takes this as an opportunity to fuel that. The same way he does with the narcissist. So now, the issues that you've had with your narcissistic parent, if you're a codependent, they now become fueled in your mind by the Qareen. So you'll get thoughts like, I need to please my father. I need to continue pleasing my father. Because remember, your Qareen is working with your father's Qareen who's a narcissist. They're working with each other because they need to keep you in the state of being a victim. So when you're constantly in the space of being a people pleaser to someone who is abusive and toxic, the Qareen keeps you in a place where he needs you to be. He or she needs you to be in the space of being a victim. They don't want you to exit that space. They don't want you to exit that state of mind. They want to keep you a victim. So every time the codependent teenager tries to break out of that mindset of, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that to make my life better, the codependent will always get obsessive thoughts and they will overthink everything that's happened to them. And it will be more a case of, how can I prove my worth to these individuals who are problematic, rather than I want to break free from being in the company of anyone like my father or like my narcissistic mother. So when the Qareen overpowers a teenager at that moment in time, it's usually because the codependent is overthinking so much because of their toxic emotions that they've now developed towards their parents, which is hate. A lot of it is hate and resentment and bitterness for being beaten and being treated so badly and being treated unfairly, like the other siblings got treated much better. That hate and resentment, the codependent feels like they can't get rid of it because they have to please that same person who's made them feel like that. Like they're determined to prove their worth to the narcissistic parent. And if they can't prove their worth to the narcissistic parent, they will look for people with the same energy. Now, a lot of people say, well, why would they do that? Why would codependents actively look for narcissists to be with? You don't. No codependent will ever enter a relationship with anyone knowing that they're a narcissist. They won't do that. Like, oh, great, he's an abuser or she's an abuser. I'm going to jump straight into that relationship. No one does that. No empath and no codependent does that. But what will happen is the codependent will be drawn to the narcissist. And that's because of their Qareen, all right? So listen to my previous podcast about how the Qareen helps the narcissistic individual to target codependents. Okay, remember, Qareens talk to each other in public. When you're out in public with many other people, the same way your soul can communicate with other people's souls. And that's why, when you meet someone for the first time, it's like, wow, I feel like I've known you for the last 20 years. And it's because al-arwah junudun mujannada, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, like the souls have already been created in Jannah, the ones that are meant to live, in this dunya and in Jannah. So they look for each other. They look for each other in this life, in this dunya. So when you meet someone and you feel like you've known them for a very long time, it's an indication that souls communicate. So if souls can communicate with each other without us seeing, then the Qareen can also communicate with other people's Qareens. All right? I know it's a deep thought, but it just makes logical sense, okay? So souls communicate, angels communicate, and the jinns communicate as well. So when you're out in public, or when you're on an app, for example, you're on a dating app, a marriage app, remember that the Qareens are working with each other because they're a part of the same mission. They're a part of the same satanic mission. They're a part of the same satanic army. So the Qareen of the codependent's mission is to match that person, that human being, with narcissists. And the narcissist Qareen's mission is to find other codependents to have as victims. Now, the narcissist can have an array of different victims. Like I said, when they're looking for a long-term source of supply, the Qareen will help them look for another codependent. When the narcissist is looking for the prized prey to bring down to their knees, they'll look for the empath because they know that they can't keep an empath for life. A codependent might stay with the narcissist for 20 years or so because the codependent has very low self-worth and they will not exit a relationship when they feel so devalued, but an empath will. So that's how they know that the empath can never be a long-term source of supply because they stand up for themselves. And the narcissist source of supply is always the old source of supply. So when they can't find supply, when they can't find an empath and they can't find a codependent, they'll just go back to easy prey, which is another narcissist. Someone that they knew before that they'll hoover, or just because the majority of people in our societies right now are narcissists, so they're the easiest people to find for a narcissist abuser. It's easier. Like they're everywhere. Narcissists are everywhere. So they're the easiest people to pick up if they're looking for a very quick and temporary source of supply. So ideally, the best people for a narcissist Qareen to target would be an empath, but it's very difficult for a Qareen to actually land themselves an empath. So they focus on what's easier Because remember, the Qareen has to report back to the shaitan. And if you're going to try and catch a deer every day, it's going to be hard. You might be waiting a week, 2 weeks until you catch a deer. But to catch a rabbit, it's a lot easier. So the Qareen wants something in their record to take back to the shaitan so that they're not shamed, ridiculed, punished. We don't know how the shaitan punishes the Qareen. We don't know. But we do know that it happens. Okay, and again, that's from a hadith of all the jinns, all the evil jinns going to the shaitan every day with their report. The shaitan will ask them, what did you do? What did you do? And the one who's given the most praise is the one who separated husband and wife. Okay? So, in this case, the Qareen will look for the rabbit prey, the easier prey to catch than the deer, because they need records to take back. And the shaitan isn't not impressed with a Qareen who brings back a record of catching mice, which is other narcissists, because those narcissists are already corrupt. They're already overpowered by their Qareens. So it's like, well, you haven't done anything. You haven't impressed me. You're bringing me people who are already corrupt by their jinn devil. You haven't done anything impressive. Bring me something better. So the Qareen will be like, okay, let me go and catch a few rabbits. It's exhausting for a Qareen to even catch rabbits, especially those who run fast. But eventually, they do, with a lot of love bombing. And that's why the love bombing phase is so exhausting for a narcissist. They hate being nice. Oh my God, they hate being kind. It makes them feel sick to be kind and nice and romantic. It's like, oh God, get me out of this. I hate being nice. Oh, it's making me feel sick to be this romantic. They hate it because it's not in their nature. The Qareen feels sick doing it. They are controlling the human part of this narcissistic entity and personality to gain the love and the infatuation and the trust of the codependent. So they will love bomb. The love bombing really works on the codependent, because the codependent is looking for that love, looking for that validation, looking for that approval. So when they get it from a narcissist that they've been trying to seek the approval from all their childhood, they're like, wow, this person is going for me. This person wants me, this narcissist wants me, but they're not looking at that person as a narcissist. They're looking at that person as having something that they want. So the codependent will be drawn to the narcissist's charm, good looks, status, money, flashy cars, career. They're a trophy. They like, the narcissist brings something to the codependent that makes them look like, I have value. This person's gone for me. I'm a nobody. I have no self-esteem, because the Qareen has made them feel that way. The Qareen constantly tells the codependent, you are nothing. You are not worthy. No one wants you. You can never get someone that you want. You're a nobody. You're nothing. So the codependent has such low self-esteem because the Qareen is constantly fueling this in their minds. And that's why when you ask a codependent in therapy, what do you think about? They're just, what do you like about yourself? They always say to me, I don't know. I can't think of anything. I ask them to write three things. Write me 3 things that you absolutely love about yourself. 5 minutes passes. I don't know what to write. And then I ask them to write 3 things that they hate about themselves. Oh, they're quick to write those 3 things. They're quick. So the codependent lives their life with self-hate. Not as much as the narcissist, but they have self-hate because they have no confidence, low self-esteem. So as soon as a narcissist comes along and they've got this grandiose demeanour and they've got charm and good looks, the codependent will clutch onto that person because this person now makes them look good. They can go and brag to everybody, oh my goodness, look at this handsome man who's with me. Look at this beautiful woman who's with me. I'm worthy of that, you see. So the codependent clings on to that relationship for as long as they can. Even if they get abused, they don't care. I need this trophy. I need people to look at me and say, wow, how did you get that person? Because when you inflate the ego of the codependent, it makes them cling on to that toxic relationship even more. And that's a part of the Qareen relationship that they have. Because the Qareen will always make them look at a toxic relationship as something that they need and something that makes them look good and something that boosts their self-esteem. So in the mind of a codependent, if the narcissist leaves, their whole life is over. I've now gone back to being a nobody. I'm now back to being a nobody. The narcissist gave the codependent their self-esteem because everyone looked at them and thought, wow, how did she get that wealthy man? How did he get that beautiful woman and he's not really that good looking? You see? So they tie their self-esteem to somebody else. So when you're out in public and you're a codependent or you're looking for a marriage partner, you will always gravitate towards narcissistic individuals because they're looking for you. Their Qareen is looking for you, and the codependent's Qareen is looking for narcissists. Because there's a deal between the two Qareens, right? There's a deal between them. I will bring you victims, and in return, you do this for me, you do that for me. So the narcissist is like, fine. We have a pact together to bring down not only the narcissist, but their victim as well. We have to destroy the codependent. And that is why the narcissistic mindset is always geared towards destroying the codependent. And they will only leave the codependent and discard the codependent when the codependent is crippled. Physically, mentally, spiritually. Look at any codependent who's been discarded, and you will see that they're discarded when they've been completely depleted of everything. Everything. And then the narcissist will go and find, with the help of their Qareen, they'll go and find another codependent. Because the codependent gives them their life support supply. The codependent keeps them going while they're on the mission of, looking for other sources of supply. That's why they cheat all the time. The codependent, they know the codependent's not going anywhere. They know that no matter how much they abuse the codependent, next 25 years, they can look for other sources of supply during that time because they know the codependent's not going anywhere. Because their self-esteem is so attached to the narcissist. That's not by coincidence. The Qareen makes you think like that. The Qareen makes you see narcissists as the right people to be with. You're blinded to other good people. You're blinded to healing. You're blinded to your own codependency until you get so devalued and so abused by a narcissist. Only then do you wake up and think, hold on, what's going on here? And that can happen after years because a lot of codependents normalize abuse. And again, that comes from your Qareen. Whatever it is that you think about as a codependent, that is what your Qareen is telling you when it's a toxic, negative thought. Okay? For example, a narcissist might verbally abuse you or physically abuse you. And your Qareen is saying, no, he loves you. He loves you. So you see that verbal abuse as him showing love. Okay? And then a Qareen will help a narcissist quickly forget about abuse by making the narcissist, the Qareen of the narcissist, will do something like bring you flowers or take you to the cinema or take you out to dinner, and you'll quickly forget. Now you're completely, it doesn't happen by coincidence, guys. All these mental gymnastics that keep going on in a narcissist's head and a codependent's head, it's all from the Qareen. All of it's from the Qareen. The codependent's Qareen's mission, their task, is to keep you a victim of narcissists. Because you're easy. You become an easy victim, an easy target. And the Qareen also has the luxury of helping the narcissist find other sources of supply, other codependents and other narcissists and other people to corrupt, while you're still there, giving them their long-term supply. So you are perfect for the Qareen. He can hit a few birds with one stone, but he can't with an empath. With an empath, you'll find that a narcissist very rarely searches for other sources of supply when they're with an empath, because they have to work 10 times harder to impress the empath. The empath isn't easily fooled. They know that the empath will leave if they abuse them early on. So the Qareen doesn't really like working on the empath, but if they manage to bring down an empath, which is rare, they will be heavily rewarded by the shaitan for doing that, okay? Now, if they can't, it's exhausting for them because they can only focus on one supply. Because if anyone was to cheat on an empath, I'm talking about high-level empath, the empath's not going to stick around. But the codependent may forgive a narcissist many times for cheating. That's the difference, you see. So it's in the benefit of the Qareen to work heavily on codependents because they're easier targets. So the deal that they make with the Qareen of the narcissist is, look, I will keep this codependent in victim mode. I will keep them in people-pleasing mode. But bring me others, bring me other codependents to work on. They have a pact with each other. Guys. So you often find that a codependent is almost asleep during their entire toxic, abusive relationship because the Qareen keeps them asleep. They're not awake to the abuse. A lot of people on the outside look into a relationship between a narcissist and a codependent and they're like, how can they not see the abuse that they're being subjected to? How can they not see how toxic their narcissistic partner is? It drives people crazy that the codependent can't see it. But the codependent has been completely blinded by their Qareen because they allow the Qareen to overpower them. They allow it to happen. Because they will get periods of time, like I said, where they'll repent and they will be empathic and they will understand that, what I'm in is abusive. But then when that happens, when the codependent starts to wake up and they start to kick a fuss now, like, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like the fact that you've just cheated on me. I don't like that you're shouting at me like this. When the codependent starts to stand up for themselves, that's when they'll see the narc rage. And when the narc rage happens, like I said in my previous podcast, the codependent and the empath will see. They will see the narcissist Qareen come out. And you will always see it in their eyes. You cannot hide what's in the eyes. All right? So you'll see the Qareen come out in the narcissist's eyes. And that's meant to intimidate the codependent. Okay? So when the codependent is now intimidated by the narc rage, they go back to square one. They go back to listening to their Qareen, telling them, you see, do you really want to be dealing with the anger of this person? Do you really want to be put in a position where you're divorced? Do you really want to be kicked out of your home? Do you really want to have your children taken away from you? Everything that the narcissist throws at you during that episode of rage, the Qareen makes you think about it. All those empty threats. For example, a narcissist might go into a rage and rave about, I'm going to do this to you. If you continue in your ways, I'm going to get a second wife. I'm going to take away the children from you. You'll never see them again. I'm going to beat you black and blue if you don't shut up. I'm going to expose you in front of everybody. I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to kick you out. You're going to have no money, nowhere to go. All of that comes out in the rage. The narcissist Qareen is making them say that. The Qareen is so angry that the codependent has found some self-worth in there to stand up for themselves and say that, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like this behaviour. I'm not accepting it. So now the narcissist Qareen has to teach you a lesson by intimidating you with all those, false threats. And now the codependent's Qareen is working on them to make sure that everything the narcissist is throwing at them is sinking in. It's sinking in. Now, this doesn't work with an empath. As soon as an empath gets to see a narc rage like that, they're out of there. Like, hell no am I dealing with this. Over my dead body am I dealing with another 5 more minutes of this. I'm out of here. After that circus show that I've just seen, after that satanic episode that I've just seen, oh my goodness, get me out of here. That's what an empath says. Get me out of here. But the codependent, because they're overpowered by the Qareen in that moment of time, they're always overpowered in their weakest moments. When they're scared, when they feel anxious, when they're depressed, when they're low, when they've got low iman. That's the only time the Qareen can overpower the codependent. But when the codependent is feeling empathic and happy and joyful and high iman, they've just come back from Umrah, they've just come back from Taraweeh, the Qareen can't really do much with the codependent there. So the codependent has to be in an environment or a situation where their vibration and their energy is extremely low. And that's why the narc rage happens. Because when the codependent is in a state of being that's high, standing up for yourself, self-esteem, confidence to stand up to the narcissist, they now have to bring that back down immediately. And that's why whenever you stand up to the narcissist, they will shut you down so quickly, because the Qareens are working with each other. The Qareen of the codependent is telling the narcissist Qareen, hey, start your narc rage, and I'll work on him or her from here. I'll make sure that what you do sinks in over here. We got to do this quickly. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you'll get the narc rage. And the Qareen will show his face or her face in the eyes of the narcissist. And this will terrify the codependent. Terrify the pants off the codependent. Because it's horrible seeing that. Now, with the codependent, because of the low self-esteem and low iman at that time, they're more intimidated and they're terrified of what can happen to them. And they believe everything that the narcissist has said in the rage episode. So now they kind of recoil, and they're like, okay, they're very intimidated. They could get involved. Reactive abuse might happen here. There might be, some back and forth, screaming matches and, throwing things at each other, and it could be really toxic. This normally happens between two narcissists together. You'll find that this is more often happening with two narcissists together. But when it's codependent narc, this can happen for a short period of time, but eventually the codependent will be overpowered by the intimidation. So the codependent will recoil and surrender. Okay? It will surrender. Maybe the codependent will go off and cry somewhere, or, just go and lick their wounds somewhere. And then what will happen here is the Qareen of the codependent and the narcissist, they both agree that the codependent can't stay in a state of being depressed for a long time. Because if they are, and other people start to notice the depression of the codependent, then other people will get involved and they might influence the codependent in a good way. They might help the codependent to get out of this relationship. They might help the codependent, seek financial support, or, find another place to live, or, do you know what I mean? Like they might find the help that they need to get out of the situation. So the Qareens, they work with each other and they say, okay, we can't keep the codependent in this state of depression for a very long time. So do something nice now for the codependent. And then you'll find, either sometimes on the same day or the next day, the narcissist will act like nothing's happened. And then you'll get a big bunch of flowers, or like I said, like you'll get a date offer. Let's go to the cinema. Let's watch a movie. Let's do this, let's do that. And the codependent's like, huh? Did you not remember what you just said to me 2 hours ago? When you said I was the worst thing that ever happened to you, and you hate me, and I'm the ugliest thing you've ever seen, and and I'm Satan himself, and I need to go for ruqya because I've got jinn, and do you not just remember what you said to me 2 hours ago? And then the narc will play stupid. What? No, what are you talking about? I was just angry. I didn't mean any of it. Come on, let's get over it. Get over it. Just get over it. And now the codependent's thinking, am I going crazy? Or is this the reality that I'm living in? And now the Qareen's thinking, okay, we can't let the codependent realise that there's abuse going on. So they allow the codependent to believe that they're going crazy. And not only that, they allow the codependent to see a part of the person that they originally fell in love with that love bombing. So it sets the codependent back to square one. Whenever a horrible narc rage episode happens, in order for the Qareens to fix that situation, they have to bring back some love bombing. And you'll see the really nice side of the narcissist again come back. And the codependent is so happy that horrible narc rage is over, and now they get the nice narcissist back, who does nice things for them, and flowers and chocolates and gifts and perfumes and God knows what, and and there's sex now again after like months of not having any. Now all of a sudden the narcissist's wife wants to sleep with you after weeks and weeks or months and months of not being interested in any form of intimacy. They do it to make you forget what you've just seen, because they don't want you to complain about it to others. So now if they can cover it up with something nice, you'll forget about having to complain about what you just saw and experienced to your family and friends. Because, thank God I didn't tell anyone about that rage, because, he's gone back to being nice now. And if you have complained to somebody about what's just happened, if you've, in that moment of anger or upset, you've called a friend and you've said, hey, or you call your mum or your sister and you're like, oh my God, this just happened. He just threw a chair at me and he said this to me and that to me. And he's divorced me 10 times already. And now he's saying, I didn't mean it. I was angry, but you're divorced. Do you know how many people I get coming to me as clients? They've been divorced over 10 times. And every time that during a narc rage episode, and every time the narc says, no, it wasn't counted because I was angry when I said it. Over 10 times they've had the talaq issued. They're living in a haram relationship now because they've been issued divorce so many times and they're still living with the narcissist, still having a sexual relationship with the narcissist. So many people out there are living in a haram relationship, guys, because the narcissist will throw out talaqs during these rage episodes, and now the wife is no longer halal for this person. You've got to be really careful about that as well. Just because a narcissist issues a talaq when they're angry again and again and again in every rage episode does not mean it doesn't count, because they know what they're doing. They know it scares you to receive the talaq, and that's how they intimidate you. That's how they intimidate you. It's not like someone schizophrenic is issuing a talaq and they're not wary of what they're saying. They're not aware of it. No, these narcissists are very aware of what they're saying in their moment of anger. And that's why you've got to listen very carefully to what a narcissist says when they're angry, because they mean it. They mean it. So a narcissist will divorce his wife multiple times on different occasions and still keep their wife in a haram, toxic relationship. Again, that's satanic mission. Satanic mission to keep you in a toxic haram relationship. Saying that, I did it when I was angry. I said it when I was angry. It doesn't count. And they convince the codependent that, okay, he said it when he was angry. I'm still his wife. Absolute little rubbish. There are so many people living out there in haram relationships thinking that they're married and they're not. Because the narcissist keeps issuing talaqs to scare the pants off the codependent every time they have a rage episode. So when a codependent calls up a family member or a friend and they're complaining about what's just happened in a rage episode of the narcissist, and the friend is like, oh my God, you need to get out, or the mother's like, oh my goodness, we need to get you out of there. We need to get you out of that situation as soon as possible. It could be a man calling his friend and his friend is saying, dude, get the hell out of there. And then About 2 hours later, maybe that friend or that family member calls you to check on you to see if you're all right. And you're like, oh, it's fine, everything is fine. No, he didn't mean it. Or she didn't mean it. Everything's fine now, we're happy now. He just took me to the theatre, he just took me to the cinema, he just bought me, loads of jewellery and loads of gold. He took me shopping to the mall. He told me to buy whatever I wanted. Everything's okay now. And they do that because they don't want the family or friends that you've complained to influence you, to help you see what you've just gotten yourself into and what you're in already. And then the people are really frustrated. Those who you've complained to are really frustrated for you. They're really upset for you. And then they try to convince you and explain to you you're in a toxic relationship. Can you not see what he's doing? He's love bombing you. He's manipulating you. And now the codependent gets really angry. Really angry with the same people they complained to because they don't want to leave the situation. Remember, the self-esteem of the codependent is tightly fixed to the narcissist. So the codependent believes that they're nothing without the narcissist. So they're just so grateful and so happy that the narcissist has got better, that the narcissist is back to his or her old self. They're now getting to experience the love bombing again, and that the rage episode is over. This is what the trauma bond is. The trauma bond is being rewarded for enabling abuse, tolerating abuse. The codependent gets put into this cycle of being abused and then rewarded for forgiving the narcissist, and then put through another cycle of abuse and then rewarded with love bombing. And it keeps going on and on and on until it becomes an addiction. So now, a lot of codependents, when they're in these kinds of relationships, they stay for so long because they anticipate the love bombing phase coming back. So they're like, if I can tolerate this abuse and this narc episode of rage, the love bombing phase I know will come after that. Because that's the Qareen cycle of abuse. The Qareen cycle of abuse is make the codependent forget about this narc rage as soon as possible so that they don't involve other people and they don't complain to other people, and so that they don't wake up to the abuse that they're in. So it's like the Qareen wants you to blindly stay in this relationship cycle where it's like a wash-spin cycle, where you're constantly being abused and then rewarded, abused, rewarded, abused, rewarded, to keep you in that relationship for as long as possible, because they've got a mission to destroy you. They're not going to leave you. They're not going to stop this cycle until you are completely destroyed. Some people are on their deathbeds by the end of a relationship. I've seen people in comas. I've seen people with broken bones in hospital beds. And that's when the narcissist is like, oh, you know what? I'm done now. Where are they going to go from here? How are they going to move on from here? Who are they going to marry from here? Nobody. So they're happy leaving you in that state. Bankrupt, you've got no money left, no health left, no beauty left, no nothing left to give them. All the narc supply that they wanted from you is gone. That's the only time the Qareen will say, that's it. We can leave this person alone now. Leave that person. And they'll leave that person completely destroyed. So can you see how the Qareens work with each other and how the Qareen of the codependent keeps them in an abusive cycle, abusive trauma bond? That's how they work with each other. And the Qareen will keep you in that trauma bond for as long as possible, because they know that when you see that good side of the narcissist, everything else goes out the window. Everything else goes out the window. It's very rare for a codependent to discard a narcissist. Unless you're closer on the spectrum to empathy, to being an empath, yeah, you might do. Maybe after 10 years, 15 years, you might say, you know what, had enough of this. But there are some people who stay in this relationship until they die. 10, 20, 25, 30 years. And they're with a very abusive narcissist, and they're still, they're with that person for life. You'll find this mainly in the older generation, like the generation of our parents. Not as much now because there's a lot of awareness coming out about codependency and narcissism. But someone who is considered now to be a high-level codependent will stay in an abusive relationship for, say, 7 to 10 years. 7 to 10 years before they decide to leave. Sometimes I'll push it to 15, because I've got clients who are in 15-year marriages with narcissists, and they're in the same trauma bond cycle. They get the same thoughts, the same behaviour, everything. It's like it's just a cycle that never ends. That is the mission of your Qareen, because it's so easy for him to do that. So easy for a Qareen to keep a codependent in the trauma bond. Because, again, you get your self-worth and validation from the narcissist, whereas the empath doesn't. So it's harder to destroy an empath. So that is what keeps a codependent in a toxic relationship with their Qareen. That's what happens. And, the times when you stand up for yourself, or when you decide that you want to go back to praying, or you want to fast Ramadan, or, you want to continue your prayers, sometimes the Qareen will let you do that as a codependent, because they just want the satisfaction of being able to take all of that away from you again. Then they know that they can. They know that they can. It's like, yeah, you know what? Let me show myself how powerful I am. Let them fast Ramadan. Let them go to Hajj. Let them go to Umrah. Let them, pray all 5 times a day. And then I'm going to put them through a horrible trauma with the narcissist that will make them go back to square one. They don't want to pray anymore. There's no energy to read Quran. They just don't have that faith anymore. You'll see codependents in and out of these cycles of Iman. And in and out of cycles of not praying. In and out of cycles of hating themselves and hating everyone around them. In and out of cycles of abuse. Because sometimes the Qareen just wants to prove to himself that even after a codependent works on himself or herself and they go back to praying and having a connection with Allah, I can bring them back down to rock bottom when I want to. I'll bring them back down. But it's that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that actually saves the codependent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's that connection that you have, that that will to keep trying with your prayers and Quran and fasting and everything, that saves you in the end from the narcissist. With most people, I'm not saying all people are saved. Some people unfortunately die in the state of being so abused. They don't get out of that situation because they refuse to see the abuse. They refuse to get help from other people. They refuse to go to counselling and therapy. There are lots of stubborn codependents as well who won't go to therapy. They don't want to do it because they've become really toxic themselves. They've taken on a lot of traits of the narcissist, and you'll find a lot of codependents don't want to go to therapy and help themselves. So unfortunately, many will die in that state of being a victim. However, other codependents will eventually wake up. And they wake up because, again, they've got that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that comes and goes, but it's there. At least it's there. At least they're trying. At least they're trying. So because they're trying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that He will help those who try. So one day, even if it's after 10 years, 15 years, you'll wake up. A codependent can wake up to the abuse and finally stand up for themselves against the narc rage and not accept the love bombing and say, you know what, no, I'm done now. I'm done. And the codependent's Qareen will hate you then. Absolutely hate you. But they will use you. They'll put you on a shelf as backup supply for a Hoover. So you'll always get hoovered. But at that point in time, when a Qareen knows that you're done for good after 10, 15 years, and you're like, you know what, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm out of here. Now I realise I've been abused. Now I realised all this time I've been a codependent. Now I realised all this time I've been dealing with a narcissist. I'm out. So now it's just a lot of effort for the Qareen to be working with this human being to get you back into the cycle, because you're now awakened. You're an awakened person now, more towards being an empath So it's easier for the Qareen to just go and find new supply. Much, much easier for a narcissist Qareen to go and find new supply. And what the Qareen of the codependent will do is try its best to attract another narcissist into the codependent's life for round 2. And this time the narcissist will be smarter than the one before. That's why when you see codependents get into relationships and different marriages with narcissists, you'll find that they always get worse. So husband number 2 wasn't as bad as husband number 1. Husband number 3 wasn't as bad as... husband number 2 wasn't as bad as husband number 3. And so on. They get worse because the codependent now is more aware of what to look out for. So the Qareen of the codependent is always looking for smarter narcissists to attract into the codependent's life. Smarter with their love bombing. Smarter with their charm. And that's why they're harder to detect. You know, the more you try to elevate yourself, the more you will come across people who are narcissistic, but they're smarter. They won't be stupid, they'll be smarter. And that's the mission of the Qareen. Because now that you've stood up to narcissist number 1, now they need to find a smarter narcissist to fool you for round 2. Okay, I know this will resonate with a lot of people because a lot of people get married the second time thinking that, oh, this person can't be a narcissist, only to find out that they are, but they're an advanced version of husband or wife number 1. Because again, the Qareen stuck to you for life. It's got to do something with you. It's got to fulfill his mission, his or her mission somehow. So if they can get you to marry another narcissist, then they're going to damn well be, very productive in making sure that you attract that covert, smart narcissist who will fool you second time round. And your Qareen will tell his Qareen how to fool you, what you need, because the Qareen knows you more than anyone else. He will tell, or she will tell, the narcissist Qareen, you know what, this person just needs words of validation. Just buy her flowers. Just tell her this or tell her that, or, buy her gifts and whatever it is. Your Qareen will expose you. Expose your vulnerabilities to the narcissist Qareen. And that's how the narcissist knows how to deal with you. They know how to win you over in the love bombing phase. They know. And sometimes a lot of people are like, how do they know how to deal with me? It's no coincidence. Qareens are communicating with each other. So, you get out of one relationship, you'll find yourself surrounded by more narcissists, because not only is it a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to for you to check and know that you've healed from being a victim, but it's also a part of the Qareen's mission to ensure that you only surround yourself with narcissists who will bring you down and destroy you. That's his mission. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that's inshallah shed some clarity on the situation. But also remember something as well, a codependent always has the ability to elevate to the status of an empath, of a nafs al-mutma'inna. And I have created a podcast on my channel, which is called How to Elevate Your Nafs. So once you learn how to elevate your nafs to the level of a nafs al-mutma'inna, you will not only help yourself, but you'll help your Qareen as well by not being around narcissists anymore. Okay, you've got to put up the right boundaries. You've got to learn how to, take control over your Qareen so he stops stabbing you in the back like this and, throwing you under the bus every time a narcissist comes into your life or is trying to attract a narcissist into your life. You need to stop your Qareen doing that as well. And it will be for his good as well as your own on the Day of Judgment. So do have a look at that. Do have a listen of that podcast, How to Elevate Your Nafs. Because at the end of the day, the work that I do, I'm trying to pull people out of the ditch of, being narcissist. I really want you guys to all work on yourselves to elevate your nafs, whether you're codependent, narcissist. I'm trying to help you guys heal in the way that I healed. And I'm passing on, this beneficial knowledge that I gained along the way that took me years and years and years to find. Years and years to understand. So I'm trying to help you gain fast track access to this information and this education and knowledge, because it would just save you so many years of, being a narcissist or being a codependent, being a victim, being at the mercy of people who are so abusive, and, and ultimately being a slave to your Qareen. No one wants that. No one wants to be a slave to their Qareen and a slave to other people as well. So a narcissist who is a slave to their Qareen wants to have control over everyone else in their life, because it's the only type of freedom they can feel and exercise. So, stop being the abusers and stop being the victims. And, I've created these podcasts to help you. At the end of the day, they're just to help you, not to attack you, not to shame anybody, not to belittle anyone's, disorders that they're going through. I'm just trying to help you productively deal with the disorders that you have, and to actually acknowledge them and address them as disorders, because a lot of people don't know that they've got disorders. I've received so many emails saying, I never knew I was codependent. I never knew I was a narcissist. I knew there was always something wrong with me, but I never knew I had NPD. I never knew that I was controlled by my Qareen. And everything now makes so much sense knowing that. So, please do take it seriously. Please do share my podcast with people, who they will really help. Do try and work on yourselves. If you can't afford counselling and therapy, it's fine. Just apply the knowledge that I'm giving you to yourselves, and you'll heal, inshallah. With everything that I teach you, you will heal if you self-reflect. Take some time out, self-reflect, and inshallah you'll become much better people. You'll become healed people step by step. And as always, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more content coming. And I really hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I really hope that a lot of things have made sense to you now. You've gained a lot of clarity into your own situation. You can resonate with all of this and apply it to your own situation and your own case. And inshallah, may Allah make this beneficial for you. Thank you so much for listening until now. And I will probably be making my podcast more frequent in order to get all the subjects out in quicker time. So I'll leave it here. But again, thank you for listening, and don't forget to share. And inshallah, until the next podcast, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.